Hi everyone, we're just going to do, a few of us are going to do a quick update on some of the work that went on at the hackathon. Hopefully a few of you were there. This is all relating to identity and staff access, and again linking to some of the IAM stuff that Scott and Craig were talking about then in Manchester. So hopefully again, this is how we want to work and link everything together. So the agenda, an intro from me. Phil's going to go over some toolkit stuff. Then we're going to move into some of the hack outputs based on the use cases that we set. Jonathan's going to pop in and give the feedback from the NHS digital side of things. Hopefully then we'll have some summary next steps from Phil, and then hopefully we can leave some time for question and feedback. So I'm just going to blast through things. So we started this journey a few years ago looking at the problems that we had with staff access and identity and the movement of staff, lots of paper involved, a lot of time taken up authorising doctors, 25,000 doctor days per year spent on pre-employment checks. That costs a lot of money and a lot of time is not spent on patient care. Fraud is big with identity, people lying to get jobs, quite expensive jobs. There was a CIO in Oxford as well, I believe, that lied about their degree certificate. This data is all over the place. It comes from very many sources, DBS service, GMC, etc., etc. Trust is a big issue. Can we trust down the road with a capital T that they've done the identity checks properly, so that the locum coming to us has been properly identified? And this links into things like single sign-on. I think people see the ideal world as one doctor, one hospital, one record, one access. It isn't like that. So we also looked at single sign-on as one of the problems. We then put those into use cases. Please contact me. We've got plenty of use cases. In the brevity's sake, I will continue on. A couple of years ago then, we also did a project, an alpha, about how these digital wallets could work together so that we could have, a locum doctor applying for a shift. They could pass us their identity and their credentials. We could then onboard them and then give them access to systems. This is an example of giving them access to one of the systems, passwordless. So Nexus is a clinical portal in Blackpool teaching hospitals. That provided a challenge as far as a QR code was concerned, and then that challenge was accepted, and the person could log on without a password. We've also done a bit of work in the past 6 months around the COVID product. So part of this passport, we've actually issued a digital staff passport. That is, bouncers in, nice one. That is actually my live digital staff passport. This has been set up for the temporary movement of staff around the NHS at this time of crisis. We've got 23 organisations registered to use this, and we're hoping to go to a wave 2 very, very soon. So we also were basing this around a lot of standards. So the big thing here is setting up an identity registry so that, again, we can trust when we're verifying the holder of this information that the issuer is actually the person that has issued this. And one of the things that we did in the past was look at the GMC issuing the doctor with their live GMC number. Again, I'm going to be really quick on this. Some details will come up later. Again, some of the standards that we were looking at, worldwide international standards. OpenID Connect is missing off there. I think someone will come up with that. So then we went into the hack. Again, I don't need me to tell you about what the hack is, but we set up a set of components, a toolkit, use cases based around doctors in training, collaborative banks, staff access, and then we had some really great presentations on what people had done with the toolkit and how they'd actually built things to meet the use cases. So again, people come, they join teams, they have questions. We had a lot of masterclasses. I can send the details of the links to that, so the people who could help the individuals to form these teams, and that's what we did, and that worked really, really well. And again, INTEROPen helped us to do all of this. That was brilliant. We wanted people to stick to the principles on PEACE. There were a couple of people that went off PEACE. That's good. We want people to think outside the box. Emlyn's on the call. He was one of the ones. I think we're going to mention his medicines credential, and that was great. So really quick introduction from me. Hopefully that's set the scene, if only very quickly. And now, hopefully, I will stop sharing. We've tested Phil can share, and Phil Stradling from NHSX will pick up for us. Thank you.
Tell me if it's coming up.
We can see your screen, Phil, but we can only... Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, just doing that. I'll go full screen. Is that working?
It is.
Yes, and so I just wanted to provide some of the strategic context for this work on identity and access, building on from what Phil Graham has been saying. And I'm also reminded with the reference to Manchester that I did find a picture on the right of when we used to be able to all stand up in front of a whiteboard and have a whiteboard hack. And this was taken in Manchester, so a good shout out to, as Scott said, as to the very enjoyable times we've had in different places working together on different themes and topics. So identity and access was one of those. And that all started a little while ago when we could all get together, led to the hackathon. And then one of the things it led to was the NHS People Plan. So on the right-hand side here is the front page People Plan that was published in the summer. I think it was in July. And what that did was to articulate a few objectives, sort of business objectives, really relating to the number of staff movements that happen within the NHS. So I think we ran a report of ESR just the last week. It was over 400,000 staff movements. It's an incredible number per year. So a lot of those are permanent staff moves. Many of those are temporary. We've got the doctors in training. So we've got this problem that the deployment of staff is very much paper-driven today. So can we look to speed that up so we can take out the time that's wasted on clinical care, as well as reduce the cost, as well as reduce the frustration for everybody with passing around lots of pieces of paper, as you saw Phil reference to. So what has happened is there's been this focus on, and there's been a focus for a long time on the concept of passporting, and is it possible to have a digital staff passport? So through all the work on discovery and alphas and proof of concepts, then it was realised that here was an opportunity, hopefully, that to establish a digital staff passport, and it's referenced in the People Plan as something they would like to pursue, particularly learning the lessons from the COVID digital staff passport service. So the ambition that's called out in the plan is to focus on some key staff groups to begin with, but essentially looking at supporting all staff groups. So medical staff groups such as doctors in training, but there's also the scientists, the administrators, the managers. They could all potentially benefit from being able to hold professional information about themselves, and for that to be interoperable to support the hiring processes, to support the movements, as I say, whether it's permanent or temporary. And so one of the key things as well to make that a realistic proposition is to improve the interoperability of workforce systems. So with the LHCRs over the last few years, it's been very much the focus on how do we have interoperable clinical and patient systems to share patient data sets around. And if you like, this is a complement, is well, we need to add APIs and data standards to make the workforce systems interoperate. And indeed, that's what you're going to see with Andrew Temple just gets on in a minute. So within the People Plan, there's a recognition, there's a huge opportunity for digital transformation. That means the NHS, E&I, through the service, regional ICS teams have got to drive that, new workforce sharing agreements, as well as the technical aspects, and very much working with suppliers to get their heads around what they can do tomorrow to support interoperability and some of the new standards. So alongside of that is if we're moving a lot of staff around, and those staff, as they get into a particular care setting, are then enabled to have access to one or more clinical systems to do their jobs, they need access to patient data to do their jobs effectively. And so what we've recognised with the LHCRs is we need a more consistent information governance approach and an access control and sort of a makeover of the access control policy. So a lot of work has been going on into that over the last 18 months. We have the IEG framework, we have a new access control policy. The intent is to not only swiftly move a clinician to where they're needed, whether it's permanent or to work a 12-hour shift, but when they get to that care setting, that clinical system can access data, it can access services, whether that's down at the GP level, locally, at a shared record level, or in a national system, whatever that national system is. It could be something NHS Digital are doing, it could be BSA, it could be Health Education England. So we just need that sense of access control that supports more consistent access to the data to do their work. So the key thing to recognise from a staff point of view is that an individual member of staff today has largely paper and some digital relationships with a whole host of bodies. They're professional bodies such as the General Medical Council or the Nursing and Midwifery Council. There's the medical schools and Health Education England. There's the central to get their right to work or their DBS checks. Identity providers are out there, and then there's all the NHS employers. And when I say NHS, should shout out, obviously it's social care employers as well. So what we're looking to do is just translate all those paper-based relationships where essentially paper certificates and documents are exchanged today into digital credentials and recognise there are a number of credential types and we've started work on what those schemas look like. So this is very much following the sort of data standards we all know and love, so that we can get to the architecture that Phil Graham briefly showed. So the idea that with the architecture around verifiable credentials as one of the new web standards, that there are three actors: an issuer. So an issuer could be the medical school, the GMC, an NHS employer. They can issue credentials. These credentials are digitally signed, so we've got cryptographic protection. They can be held by an individual in an app on their phone. We call that the digital wallet or the digital staff passport. And then when they have the need to share that, they can present those credentials, one or more, to another party acting as a verifier who can then verify the signatures, so they're assured of the integrity and the provenance, hence if there is trust in that information. So that's the model. So what we'll do now is see that put to life, or hopefully brought to life by Andrew, focusing on collaborative banks, where collaborative banks is one of the key objectives in the people plan and something that we've been exploring locally, and Andrew will take you through that story. Andrew.
Thank you, Phil. I'm just going to attempt to share my screen and then I'll make a start. If you just bear with me 1 second. Okay. So before I start, I'm Andrew Temple. I'm a project manager at Blackpool Teaching Hospitals, and as a trust with a user need, as Phil described, I've been working with NHSX on these proofs of concepts and pilots of this technology for a couple of years now, and we're at the point where an outline business case has been approved for the collaborative bank vision I'm about to describe. We're now moving towards a full business case with inputs from NHSX and INTEROPen and NHSC. So what is a collaborative bank? Well, in Blackpool, for example, we call it Bank Pool. It's a bank of 0-hour contracted staff to cover gaps in shifts. So the staff on this bank can be substantive, non-substantive, they can be clinical, non-clinical, and a collaborative bank is just an expansion of that with, several trusts. So it's a pool of banks. It could be in a region, e.g. an ICS, or it could be nationwide, and it could be set up to rival locum agencies. So what I'm going to do now is go through the vision. So I'm just going to maximise my screen. So in a collaborative bank, if you want from the doctor's perspective or from any member of staff perspective that's on the bank, you just want to go on an app and apply for any of those shifts in the collaborative bank. You want to post vacancies if you are a recruitment officer in a trust with a gap in your shift, and you want to be able to view the applicants and select the appropriate applicant. Then you need to be able to give them systems access. Now, I could tell you a few horror stories about locum packs and generic usernames and passwords being written on pieces of paper ready for locums turning up in the middle of the night, which I'm sure if any of you work in acute settings, you might have come across before. And ultimately, this translates into patient benefits because the clinician's time is freed up, and we can fill vacancies quicker, and ultimately we can reduce costs as well. So what is the user experience as per the vision? So I'll just drill down into a little bit more detail. So to set the scene, I'm going to speak about this from a doctor's perspective who is substantive at Blackpool and wants to work extra shifts in his local region to build his experience and earn some extra income as well. So the prerequisites for this story is that Dr. Manny has a digital staff passport preloaded, as we call it. And this already contains the credentials that have been issued regarding his identity, his skills, his occupational health and training, Prof Reg and DBS and so on and so forth. Now, from Brenda's perspective, we called her a bank recruitment officer, but this could be a rota coordinator or anybody that requires a shift. She just needs a doctor to fill a night shift ASAP. She has access to the collaborative bank exchange system, which I'm going to describe, and she can post vacancies. So applying for shifts. So Dr. Manny, with his preloaded wallet, he can access the collaborative bank system, and these slides are taken from the INTEROPen hack, where a team of hackers looked at the use case that we proposed and pulled this together. So it's the bare bones of a potential future application. So Dr. Manny signs into the collaborative bank, and he can send verified proofs of his position and his specialty. So now he can receive tailored vacancy notifications on his app, which he can then apply for. So from Brenda's perspective as the recruitment officer, she has posted a vacancy on the internal system, which appears on the bank exchange system, and Dr. Manny can look through these different roles in the patch, which is Lancashire and South Cumbria ICS, and apply for those positions. So Dr. Manny has applied with his digital staff passport, and now he can be onboarded. So before he's onboarded, of course, there might be other applicants. So Brenda can look through the verified information of the other applicants and select the successful one. But Manny is successful in this instance, and because he has already had his verified information checked by Brenda as part of the onboarding checks, he can now receive a sort of what we call a shift assignment credential. Essentially, that's proof that he's been successful in his application for that vacancy, and you can kind of think of it as his employment contract that he can now work for X amount of time in that particular position. So systems access, which we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail shortly. So using the digital staff passport, Brenda can issue systems access credentials to his wallet. Now, we've done several proofs of concepts and pilots, and we've demonstrated this is a screenshot of our EPR type system called Nexus, and we can see that in addition to the other methods of logging in, we can see that you can log in with a staff passport. So by clicking that, Dr. Manny can hold up his phone to the screen and it will take him in without a password. So it might not be 100% suitable for every single environment in the hospital to authenticate in this way, but it does solve multiple problems in the sense that, the horror stories that I've said before about locums turning up in the middle of the night, using other people's usernames and passwords, or, picking up generic pieces of paper with usernames and passwords written on them. He can now log into this system safely, and he's verified and it's secure. So, as I said previously, that translates into patient benefits and better staff satisfaction as well, because they're not wandering around the hospital wondering which department to go to pick up their username and password, which happens quite frequently. So how do we do this? Well, there's a couple of different components. So one of which is this bank exchange system. So each individual trust is its own legal entity. They can buy whatever rostering system they want. But the problem with a collaborative bank is that you need to be able to see vacancies no matter what rostering system is used in each trust. So what we can do here is, on the bottom right hand side, is utilise NHS Digital's temporary staffing API to post all the vacancies into a central location, which we're calling the Collaborative Bank Exchange system. And then Dr. Manny doesn't actually care what rostering system any of these trusts use. He can see a vendor neutral app on his phone which can display those vacancies, and he can apply regardless. So they're going to talk about access and identity systems access shortly, but what a trust needs to do to enable systems access, well, there's a few different components, one of which is to implement a digital staff passport service, and another one is to automate the provisioning of accounts. Another is to implement what we're calling an OpenID Connect bridge, and then we need to ensure that existing apps are updated to support these standards. So that's my slides finished. So I will hand over to Rob now.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew. I think my colleague Richard's on is going to explain some of the nuts and the bolts, and then I'll sort of cover the business aspect to it and the system access control and how that works from the latter part of the collaborative bank process. In other words, what happens when you've been assigned a shift and how do you get to the stage where you can start being efficient on the ward, entering data into a clinical system.
So hi folks, yeah, I'd just like to talk to you a little bit. I've got a brief presentation here, so it's all about system access using the Condatis IBC bridge. So I'll just give you a little introduction on it. So we came along to the INTEROPen Staff Access Hackathon, and we brought along a Condatis SSI SDK and made it available as part of the toolkit. So it ended up being used by many of the hacks on the day. And we brought along a sample Reliant party, which I'll show you a video demonstration of it. And we also did a little bit of work with EMIS during the hack as well, and they used it to grant system access to their NHSX system. So we used a Condatis SSI issuer on the day to create a staff record. We created a connection with the staff members Connect Me wallet, and then we issued a credential out to their wallet. Once they've got a credential in their wallet, we could then use our OIDC bridge. So we registered a Reliant party against our bridge, and we also configured what we called a scope to credential attribute mapping, which allowed the Reliant party to really consume a credential. So you'll see here we've got an email address being consumed. From the Reliant party side, once it had been configured, we could actually use the Reliant party to query the wallet and make a proof request. So as I say, NHSX on the day used it to grant system access. So I've got a screenshot there where you can see Condatis logo as a login option. So I've also prepared a demo video presentation for you so you can see it live in action. So it's just a couple of moments where I've used our staff passport system to issue a credential. So I'll play this and talk it through. So we'll sign into a staff passport here, and I'm going to create a new contact. So I'll just create a contact with my own details here for you. So it's very basic, first name, last name, mobile number and email address. And as I say, it's the email address that was used to grant system access. So once I've created my new contact, I'll create a connection with the Connect Me wallet, which you can see on the right hand side of the screen here. So I'm just creating a connection request here, which is presenting the QR code, and I'll scan that QR code with my Connect Me wallet, and it gives me the option to accept the connection. So once I've got a connection established with the wallet, the staff passport can start securely communicating with the wallet. And what I'll do now is I'll actually issue a credential out to that contact. So I'll add the last bit of my profile, which is a profile picture here. And once this is added, I'll start to actually create a credential and issue it out to the wallet. So here the credential I'm going to issue is my first name, last name, email address and my mobile phone number. It gives me an opportunity to preview this, and if I'm happy, I'll issue it out to the wallet. So what's happening now is it'll create a request to push that credential to the wallet, and now the user's got to decide whether they want to accept that credential into the wallet or not. So we'll accept that credential into the wallet, and now that's the staff member and user got a credential available and they can start using it. So what we've got now is we can actually go to a relying party and start using it. So I've got a sample relying party which we've already configured against the bridge for an email scope, and I'll make a request off to the bridge. So the bridge is an agent, and it's going to deal with communication between the wallet and relying party. So again, it's displaying a QR code because it's going to create a proof request to the wallet. So I scan the QR code with the wallet, and it will handle the proof request. I've already got a connection with this wallet, so what will happen now is it'll push a push request through that connection to the wallet, and it gives the user the option here to send their email address. So as long as I'm happy, I grant access that way. It goes back to the bridge and it's verified there, and as long as it passes verification, it'll then go back to the relying party, and you can see the email address has been shared there. So that shows you a live working system, and as I say, this was used by many of the hacks on the day. I think it was really well received. We got good feedback saying it was very easy to consume verifiable credentials using the bridge, and we proved it could be used to grant system access, and it can also support many other uses. So I think what I'll do now, I'll pass you back over to Rob Walker, who'll show you another example of system access based on all this technology.
Thank you, Richard. So yeah, just to take stock really, as you saw in Andrew's presentation earlier, what's happening in the first part of this system is that in our scenario here, Manny, who's the doctor, works substantively for Blackpool teaching hospitals, and in the course of his employment there, he's issued with this credential. And what's happening is that credential is going onto this digital wallet that was just shown, and you can think of that as a physical representation of your normal wallet that holds different cards in it, where the cards might be your driving license or your credit card or so on and so forth. These digital representations are similar to that. You're receiving into your wallet these digital verifiable credentials. And through that process of going onto the collaborative bank, what Manny has is two of those types of credit cards in his wallet now. He has one that's been issued to him by his substantive employer, and that credit card, effectively that digital credential, is about who he is, or at least who Blackpool says he is. And then he's got this second credential that's in his wallet now that's been issued to him through the collaborative bank system to say you've applied for a shift, and this other entity, East Lancashire Teaching Hospitals, has assigned you to that shift. So he's kind of got those two cards in his digital wallet, and that's the process up until this point. And what we're really trying to do at that stage is then streamline the process by which Manny can come into East Lancashire Teaching Hospitals, who he hasn't worked with before, and really on the first day, get into the ward, be able to access all the doors that he wants to access and access the clinical systems without any delay. What we found in this use case was that there's quite a few scenarios where, particularly with agency banks, where clinicians just aren't able to access the systems in time, and they're having to sort of lean over their shoulder and ask substantive health professionals that they're working alongside to enter data for them, and it's just not quick enough. So the whole point of this was to be able to streamline the onboarding process once the collaborative bank steps happened, so that Manny, as a person working on the bank, can become effective and have all the same access, the validated access that he needs as a normal member of staff. And so the sequence that happens to get to that point, beyond having been assigned the shift through the collaborative bank, is that Manny, before he turns up to the new hospital, East Lancs, he's given this onboarding link, and it sort of says maybe 2 or 3 days in advance, Manny, we need you to sort of do a couple of pre-checks and on board with us just so we can get you ready to go, on the day of your shift. So what he gets given in that link there is a URL to go to like an automated onboarding site that's owned by East Lancashire Teaching Hospitals. And when he visits that site, he's asked to sign into the site, but he isn't given any new credentials. What he's able to do is sign into that site using his digital staff passport, his wallet. And so he's effectively authenticating himself based on something that he's already got that's verifiable. And as a result of going to that onboarding site and presenting himself with those credentials, East Lancashire are then able to process his access. In this particular case, he's granted access to EMIS, the PAS system, and a certain number of doors that give him access to the ward that he's due to work on. So that all happens well in advance of the day of the shift. And he's also then, as part of that process, issued with a third credential, a third thing to hold in his wallet, and that's his identity as dictated by East Lancashire. So he has all of that before he turns up on the shift. And then as a result of having all those things in his wallet, it means that then when he turns up for the shift, he's able to access the right doors and have equitable access to the computer systems he needs to have access to by signing to them again using his digital wallet. So he doesn't have to have another set of credentials, a new set of usernames and passwords. He doesn't have to go through any complicated onboarding processes. It's all inherent in what he already has. And then finally, there's these sort of mop-up steps where after the shift is completed or his duration of employment with East Lancashire completes, his access is revoked. That's all supported through these standardised protocols that we've been working with. And then the very final step is at the end, East Lancashire Teaching Hospitals is able to issue a fourth credit card, if you like, a verifiable credential to his wallet to give evidence of the fact that he did that shift and what he did during that shift, so he can use it for medical evidence. For example, you know, if he needed to submit it to the GMC at the end of the year to prove that he's practiced and, you know, for his renewal of license to practice. All of those sequence of steps are underpinned by this standardized way of passing verifiable credentials between an issuer, the person that holds the credential, and somebody that might need to verify it. And that's kind of how it works end to end.
Thank you, Rob. Scott thinks that's really nice, so excellent. Hopefully now we can pass over to Jonathan Telfer, NHS Digital, to give us some of the feedback he got from the work that was going on.
Now we did the test the screen sharing thing. Of course, the screen sharing thing, when we need to do it, it's not doing its thing, which is really useful. Give me 2 seconds. Can you see that?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to take you through the actual presentation I presented at the end of the hack, because I think it's useful for people to see kind of what goes on a bit at the hacks, and if you haven't been to a 2 days hackathon, just what you can do in a couple of days with some interesting people and some useful tech. So this is the presentation, what I actually presented on the final day. So looking at the collaborative bank piece of work, that's been mentioned already, which is a really interesting use case for staff using moving around on a fairly frequent basis, and some of the problems that kind of we've talked about that causes for them. And it's an interesting problem from an NHS digital perspective, looking at the staff passport and the digital wallet and thinking about how it is that we can help, particularly from an NHS identity and CIS perspective, with the credentials and the authentication that we already know about for staff users where they've been through that registration authority process. So we know they have an IAL3 level identity, and where can we bring that to bear to help this use case out. So over the course of the couple of days, what we actually did was we built a thing, and the thing works where you have an NHS new joiner. So somebody comes into the NHS, and the RA needs to verify that. I always wibble my mouse. I hope you can see my mouse wibbling at the bit I'm looking at. Otherwise, I might as well be pointing at the screen hopelessly. So they get their identity verified by the RA. That's great. This all happens today. And an account gets created in CIS technically, but actually we're thinking about the future and NHS identity. So that creates a thing over there. So at that point, we know you've been through an IAL3 level identity assurance process. So an RA has sat down with you or remotely looked at your identity documents, is happy that Bob is really Bob and is not really Dave or some other person. So we know quite a bit about you and the fact that you are who you say you are at that point. So what we posited was that we could potentially help by offering a credential, a digital credential, into that staff member's wallet that confirms some of those things. So confirm their name, confirmed potentially their date of birth, that the fact that they have been through that identity assurance level, so we can say, yes, Bob has been through this, you don't need to do it again, it's all good, somebody somewhere has done it, you don't need to worry about who, you don't need to worry about how, it's good, we trust this person. They don't need to rock up with their smart card physically to tell you that, we can tell you that digitally through this system. And we put on this account ID, which is what we posited was it's just your SIS UUID, so it's the number you would see if you looked at somebody's smart card, or that you would know them by. So there's a couple of things I think we can usefully bring to the party. One is the fact that somebody's been through that process somewhere, and we can prove that digitally in a verifiable, cryptographically verifiable way. And also we can give you an identifier, and in the CCO 7 we talk about consistent staff identifier. We can give you a national identifier that is persistent, that doesn't change, that moves around with that staff member, can be used potentially to access spine and national services. So there's a useful thing there that we can offer. So we offer that out, the user accepts it, and that gets written into their wallet. And then as part of the hack, we also looked at how we would consume that. So we looked at this OIDC bridge that was put together for the hack, and that was really, really interesting, because on this side over here, digital wallets and credentials, it's all brave new world and terribly exciting and very, very new and novel. But over here on this side, where we've got employers and existing organisations who aren't, necessarily on board with the new world yet, we might have other ways of wanting to integrate, and some systems and organisations are kind of comfortable with OpenID Connect as a standard and working with that. So the OIDC bridge was really interesting to us, because what it does is it gives a way of taking the things that are in the credential here and then mapping them through the bridge onto OIDC scopes. So if anybody's familiar with OpenID Connect, it's just the attributes in an OpenID Connect identity token that gives you information about the subject of that token. So what we proved was that we could take that credential. We could somebody could ask for a view of that credential from the user. The user gets to prove it, because this is all under the control of the user. We don't foist any of this on them. The user has to say, I accept this credential. I give consent for this organisation to see this credential for this purpose, and we could access those credential attributes and see them coming through in the OpenID Connect token, and that potentially is the bridge to being able to use that for authentication, authorization into systems as well. So that was terribly useful, and in 2 days from something we've never seen before, that was really good thing to get done. The hack discovery stuff, this is a really key output. This is just kind of about the hack in general. When we're going through the hack, kind of learning what we're doing, it's really good to kind of document this, to get thoughts into kind of like what went well, what were our challenges on it, and sharing those with the other teams and kind of seeing what similar challenges and things people had. But there's this top bullet, if you can see my mouse wibbling again, is I think it's really important for this technology. So if you go looking, single self-sovereign identity, distributed identity, blockchain, oh my, it's also terribly, terribly complicated. Lots of cryptography, which I can barely even say in there, to make it all work. But what we found is you don't really need to get your head around any of that. At the end of the day, it's an API that issues a credential with some data fields in it, and it's kind of as simple as that. There's some steps to go through to set it all up, but actually it's not that scary. Under the covers, a little bit scary to work with practically on a day-to-day basis, actually really, really straightforward. So really good stuff. Thanks to all the guys that made the tech available for the hackathon. That was great. If you haven't been to one, go. Even if you're not technical, just go, enjoy it, have a good time, get involved in a team. They are really, really good things to do. And that's me.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Nice back screen. Phil, if we come back to you, you were going to do summary next steps, and can you feed into questions and feedbacks? I think we've probably got about 10 minutes to squeeze in a little bit, about 15 minutes. So is that all right, Phil?
Yeah, am I sharing again? Let me just click on something.
Yeah, it's coming up. Thank you very much.
My email again. There we go. So next steps. Oh, should we go doodly do? So we've got the work, we've informed and shaped the people plan in terms of a business strategy. We've done the hack. We've done something for COVID. We're exploring what other suppliers can bring to support those standards. So we've got a joint program between E&I pushing the business side, with X looking at the digital side, and I think Jonathan has just recapped it really well, how there is the potential here, even though some of the technology is quite new. It's relatively straightforward, whether you're an NHSX body or a supplier, to get your head around it and start using it. So what we crucially need to do through that joint program is, subject to all the usual commercial, financial, spend control approvals, which we're starting to get our arms around, and it's obviously subject to spending review and money being available, is to move forward, where NHSE and I will push ahead with these new workforce sharing arrangements, so we can establish a license to attend, a contract based on the digital capabilities rather than the paper-based capabilities for sharing credentials. So that'll be a key part of the business element. Digital element will be very much around the standards, the engaging the suppliers, as you've just heard. So from a business point of view, there's a number of key objectives. Doctors in training, so we give the junior doctors who come to us twice a year at 50,000 at a time, hopefully they start to get a better experience, and then crucially on collaborative banks, as you've just heard, and those capabilities will then just generally provide support for staff movements in general. And I think, as you probably saw with the fact we're dovetailing into existing standards, it's very much then able to enable the clinician that's accessed EMIS or Nexus, the clinical system. They've got the IG token, they've got the claims. It then very much supports the new access control model, so we can call out to PDS or NEMS or NRL to get pointers, and then we can go and get the record wherever the record sits. So that's some of the next steps, that just mapping out some of the stepping stones that we want to pursue. Then the thing that Emlyn put together was, he took the fire profile for medications and said, well, can I issue a credential that represents a prescription and give it to an individual, and it's digitally signed? So there then be a use case that the individual, the patient, has got the medication on their wallet. They could then choose the pharmacist, present the prescription, and that just sort of touches on where we might go in the future. And then crucially, just echoing back on things we did in Manchester when we could meet together, Scott, we learnt last year Manchester's work on the pods, where enabling an individual to have their data, create their data, but crucially to hold their data and control the sharing of that data, things called pods. So there's growing interest in where that sort of technology can go for patient empowerment and patient-facing tools. And again, can we link up these things? So we're working on some common themes and standards. So that indicates some of the next steps we hope to pursue, subject to things all falling into place.